We're here doing a recording. We're here doing a CBC interview with Charles C. Agro. So, seeing how that goes. My name is Yafet Tawaldin, representative of the Justice is Not Colorblind. Well, it really depends on what you're talking about. When you're talking about the black community, we can talk about the tension stemming from the police, really beyond the police. We're talking about a history of colonialism and enslavement that has happened in Canada historically, Canada being a white settler colony. And when we think about that history of policing, we're thinking about a history of Canada under the British Crown and then Canada becoming its own country, managing its black populations. And so when we think about this history today, this is sort of the legacy that we're talking about. So as a campaign, as a coalition, what we are arguing is that we do not think about, we do not accept this idea of black on black violence being sort of this decontextualized sort of event, but rather we want to place it in its context and relate it to an even bigger issue as we see it and one of police violence and police brutality against our community. And so this is what we need to organize around and think about. Just yesterday at the deputation, Bill Blair said something very interesting. He said that the reason why the Eaton Centre shooting was such an event for people was that it brought violence to the city core. And if you read between the lines of what he's saying, is that it brought violence to this part of the city that it doesn't belong in, right? Violence, according to him, and according to people who are sort of their sensibilities being shocked by the Eaton Centre shooting, belongs sort of in the outskirts, in the communities where there's poverty, there's high groups of black and racialized communities. That's where violence belongs. That's where gun violence belongs. When it comes down to downtown Toronto, to the Eaton Centre, it happens where violence doesn't belong, because it doesn't belong amongst the capitalist industry. It doesn't belong in the areas we do our shopping, right? It belongs in those communities. It doesn't belong amongst us.
So,
and that's specifically what Bill Blair said at the deputation yesterday. No, we can't say that. It was pretty clear. Even the Toronto Star that reported this sick thugs type of gang that committed had to even retract that story. They even had to retract that it was a gang called Sick Thugs, because that actually was a misnomer. It was referring to Sick Thugs apparently are just some rap group, right, that the people who were involved in the shooting listened to, and some random police officer called them, this is the Sick Thugs gang, sort of like pejoratively. It wasn't an actual, there was no actual gang. So we can't say that. It would be irresponsible for me to say that and for you to say that. No, because what the stats show and what studies have shown time and time again are that raids and sweeps don't actually keep the communities safer, but they actually put communities in further peril. And the ways that happen is the communities are further criminalized. You know, if we're really talking about, like, one of the things Bill Blair said is that yesterday's deputation that the people who are committing these crimes across the city are a very small number of our city. And if it's a very small number of our city, then why sort of cast out this large net where you're taking all kinds of people in who may not have anything to do with drugs, anything to do with crime. They haven't even seen a gun. Just because they live in Regent Park doesn't mean they know anything about those types of things. And so, or Alexandra Park. People do live in terror, right? But they don't just live in terror of these of supposed random gangs running the streets. I mean, we won't deny that gun violence is happening, that youth and non-youth are shooting people. Like, I mean, we're not denying that. But what we are saying is that is not the whole of the issue, right? If the police were really concerned about doing those things, they wouldn't be taking sort of these after the fact tactics of increased raids and sweeps, increased police patrols. Those are responses after the fact. If the police, and by virtue of the government and the city, were really interested in those things, they would actually pump more resources into actual grassroots community type organizations that are focused on addressing the issues of black youth. Yes, that's exactly what the problem is. They're targeting these communities that have been that have already been criminalized, already stigmatized. We already know what the stigma for Regent Park is. We already know what the stigma of these priority neighborhoods are. And so, by further criminalizing these communities, you create this vacuum, and you do not address what the real issue is. The real issues are lack of education opportunities, lack of employment opportunities. Raids and sweeps only further this criminalization process. And so what we say is that if we really want to get a justice, Bill Blair, then address the corruption within your own police force. Address this history of abuse that actually creates these instances of violence that happen within these communities. And so, if justice is supposed to be meted out fairly and equitably for all people, there is a huge imbalance that we're seeing, right? And as a campaign, what we're arguing is that justice is not colorblind, meaning justice is being meted out quite unevenly. Black and racialized people are seeing the brunt of the legal system. Studies have shown that they do not address the problem. You know,
finding drugs and getting those guns off the street.
If it was about gun control, if it was about drug control, if it was about gang control, right? Then you do not go to the places where they end up. That's like emptying the ocean with a teaspoon trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. Like it doesn't address the problem. You go to the sources, you go to the roots. We have a massive amount of legal gun trade that is happening. Does the Canadian government, in connection with the provincial government, have an interest? According to studies that have been done, according to even the Toronto Star report, these interactions, these instances of racial profiling are ones of abuse, are ones of tension, as you said, as you witnessed today yourself, are ones of conflict. These are not healthy interactions. These are not healthy relationships. What we're seeing between the police and with the Black community is part of a larger history of abuse between the police, the Black community, and other racialized communities. We cannot mince our words about that, and we cannot try and simplify those things. And what the police response is, through Project Post, through increased patrol presence, through the pending raids and sweeps, through programs such as TABIS, through carding, which leads to which is part of the racial profiling issue, is to simplify the issue. That is what they're doing, because what they're telling us is through racial profiling, through carding, through going after quote-unquote high crime communities, they are saying that these are the problems of the city of Toronto, of issue of crime. And what they don't address are, as I said, the lack of employment opportunities, the lack of educational opportunities, the lack of options that plague many of these communities. You know, as youth outreach workers that make up our campaign, no one will tell you that policing and raids and sweeps in this way is the issue, or the ways you address these things. And that's what we have to address. We can't just simplify it for the sake of simplicity's sake.
Okay.
You move poor people out of socially assisted housing. You quote unquote revitalize the area, put in high price living arrangements where the people can't even move back to these communities. You know, part of addressing this problem that we've seen even from the city outside of policing is to just get rid of the poor people profiling. What we're seeing are massive arrests of people. We're seeing a complete exodus of people from their communities, right? And this is not unreal. In Lawrence Heights, we have this issue of gentrification that's happening. You know, one of the reasons why we even sent that press release is because when we saw the coverage of the deputation yesterday, right? At the deputation, the Justice is Not Colorblind campaign made a deputation specifically relating this issue of racial profiling, the issue of police brutality, to hate crime, because part of the report that Blair was releasing yesterday as well was a report on hate crimes, and yet. What was done instead was to completely ignore that and relate it to a canceled hip-hop event because of supposed violence the police said might have happened, right? And the coverage of this, right, is being done in a way to manufacture some type of story that really doesn't address the issue of policing itself. When are we going to see the issue of policing being addressed, the issue of police brutality being addressed? You know, in Toronto, we have over 3,000 cases of the SIU investigating police for lethal force, and only 2 have been charged, not a single arrest. You know, and yet we don't want to place in that context. The police, before the Eaton Centre, the police were under massive criticism because of the G20 reports, because of the racial profiling report by the Toronto Star. Yeah. You know, one shooting happens right at the downtown core, and all of a sudden, we're supposed to galvanize around the police as if all these other issues don't matter anymore, and that is a huge problem. And I think that is partly why we even sent that press release. And you know, I'm glad you contacted me. Why the CBC wants to report on this, and I would hope that they would, you know, broaden the analysis and broaden the discussion here.
Okay.
Much. It was nice.
So it was nice to meet you too. Good luck with your work.
When we'll be free, so we patiently wait for that fateful day. It's not far away, but For now we say, when I get older, when I get older, I will be stronger. Just like a waving flag, flag, flag. Just like